Changing the Constitution is a perennial issue that comes up in terms such as cha-cha. Con-as and con-con are regularly thrown around. Article 17 of the 1987 Constitution provides for 3 ways by which the Constitution can be changed. Congress, House of the Representatives, and the Senate may convene as a constituent assembly to propose amendment to the Constitution. It is not clear, however, if Congress is to vote a single body or separately. How the Congress convenes as a con-as is also not provided for the Constitution. The Constitution provides that an amendment may be proposed either by the Congress with a 2/3 majority vote in both House of Representatives and Senate, or by a constitutional convention called by the 2/3 of the state legislatures. The Congress proposes an amendment in the form of a joint resolution. Since the President does not have a constitutional role in the amendment process, the joint resolution does not go to the White House for signature or approval. A proposed amendment becomes part of the Constitution as soon as it is ratified by the 3/4 of the states.
Of Congress, like the Senate, are inventions which cannot be done by a people's initiative. These methods were Constituent Assembly, Constitutional Convention, and People's Initiative. Using those methods, there were efforts to amend or change the 1987 Constitution, starting with the presidency of Fidel V. Ramos, who succeeded the first attempt was in 1995 when then Secretary of National Security Council Jose Almonte drafted a constitution, but it was exposed to the media and never prospered. The second effort happened in 1997 when a group called Firma hoped to gather signatures from voters to change the Constitution through a people's initiative. Many were against this, including the Senator William Santiago, who brought the issue to the court and won, with the Supreme Court judging that the people's initiative cannot push through without an enough vote. Succeeding President Joseph Ejercito formed a study commission to investigate the issues surrounding charter change, focusing the economic and judiciary provisions of the Constitution. This effort was also blocked by different entities after President Estrada was replaced by another people power and succeeded by a vice president. The administration of the succeeding President Benigno Aquino III had no marked interest in charter change, except those emanating from different members of Congress, including the Speaker of the House Valencia Belmonte Jr., who attempted to introduce amendment to the Constitution that concerned economic preventions that aim toward liberation. This effort not see the light of day.
Land ownership. Ownership is the state or fact of exclusive rights and control over property, which may be any asset, including an object, land or real estate, intellectual property, or until the 19th century human beings. Post-war. In the post-war years, couples that could not afford families during the Great Depression made up for lost time. The mood was now optimistic, unemployment ended, and the economy greatly expanded. Millions of veterans returned home and were forced to reintegrate into society. Primary. A primary source gives the words of the witnesses or the first recorders of an event. Primary sources include manuscript, archives, letters, diaries, speeches. Secondary sources are description of the event derived from based on primary sources.
Agrarian reform efforts under Marcos. Land reform in the Philippines has long been a contentious issue rooted in the Philippines' Spanish colonial period. Some efforts began during the American colonial period, with renewed efforts during the Common, following independence, during martial law, and especially following the People Power Revolution in 1986. The current law, the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program, was passed following the revolution and recently extended until 2014. Post-1986 Agrarian Reform. President Ferdinand E. Marcos, 1965 to 1986. Proclamation number 1081 on September 21, 1972. Ushered the period of the new society. Days after the proclamation of martial law, the entire country was proclaimed a land reform area, and simultaneously the Agrarian Reform Program was decreed. President Marcos enacted the following laws: Republic Act No. 6389, Code of Agrarian Reform, and RA No. 6390 of 1971. Create the Department of Agrarian Reform and the Agrarian Reform Special Account Fund. It strengthened the position of farmers and expanded the scope of agrarian reform. Presidential Decree No. 2, September 26, 1972, declared the country under Land Reform Program. It enjoined all agencies and offices of the government to extend full cooperation and assistance to the DAR. It also activated the Agrarian Reform Coordinating Council. Presidential Decree No. 27, October 21, 1972, restrict land reform scope to tenanted rice and corn lands and set the retention limit of 7 hectares. The Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program, more commonly known as CARP, is an agrarian reform law of the Philippines whose legal basis in the Republic Act No. 6657, otherwise known as the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Law. It is the redistribution of private and public agricultural lands to help the beneficiaries survive as small independent farmers, regardless of the tenural arrangement. Its goals are to provide landowners equality in terms of income and opportunities, empower landowner beneficiaries to have equitable land ownership, enhance agricultural production and productivity, provide employment to more agriculture workers, and put an end to conflicts regarding land ownerships.
Taxation in Spanish Philippines. The Philippines may have abundant natural resources even before the enroachment of the Spaniards. The payment of tributes or tax, buwis, handog, or obligation to provide labor service to the datos in some early Filipino. The arrival of the Spaniards altered this substance system. They imposed the payment of tributes from the Filipinos, similar to what has been practiced in all colonies in America. The purpose is to generate resources to finance the maintenance of this island, such as salaries of government officials and expenses of the clergy. The difficult faced by the Spaniards in revenue collection through the tribute was the dispersed nature of the settlement. In the 16th century, the Manila-Acapulco trade was established through the galleons. Tax collection was still very poor, and subsidy from the Spain will be needed through the Situadorio delivered from the Mexican treasure to the Philippines through the galleon. This subsidy stopped as Mexico became independent in 1820. In 1884, the payment of tribute was put to stop and was replaced by a poll tax collected through a certificate identification called the cedula personal. The Chinese in the Philippines were also made to pay their discriminatory cedula, which is bigger than what the Filipinos pay. Direct tax were added in 1878 and imposed on urban incomes or ban in tax on salaries, defense, and profits. Indirect tax such as customs were imposed on export and imports to further raise revenue, especially during the 19th century when economic growth increased exponentially. The colonial government also gains income from monopolies such as the sale of stamp paper, manufacture and sale of liquor, beds, and opium. But the biggest of the state monopolies was tobacco, which began in 1781 and halted in 1882. Forced labor was a character of Spanish colonial taxation in the Philippines and was required from the Filipinos. Through the pulo system, Filipinos were obligated to serve a burden that resulted to an increase in debt rate and fight to the mountains, which led to a decrease in population in the 17th century. The polos will be called restitution, personal service by the second half of the 19th century. The principal who were given positions such as cabezas de barangay of alcaldes in the local government were able to enrich themselves by pocketing tributos and orphans, while the peasants were left to be abused. Taxation appeared progressive, but the disparity between the less taxed principal and the heavily taxed peasant made the rich richer and the poorer. Primary source Marian Herbosa writes to Rizal about tax. They called irrigated rice, and even it has no water, must pay a tax 50 kavanas of speed 5 pesos in cash. The land they call dry, that is planted to sugar, maize, and other, pay different rates. Thank you.
Pick for today, is Philippines taxation under American period 1898 to 1935. 1898 to 1903, Americans followed the Spanish system of taxation. Americans made to make the economy self-sufficient by running the government with a possible some revenue and create surplus in the budget. From 1898 to 1903, the Americans followed the Spanish system of taxation with some modification. Later on, the urbana will be replaced by tax on real estate, which became known as land tax. The urbano, which is a tax on the annual rental value on a urban real estate, first place known as land that are charged both urban and rural real estate. The problem with the tax was that landing titling in the rural area was very disorderly. In the early American regime, from the period 1898 to 1903, the country was ruled by American military governor. In 1902, the first civil government was established under William H. Taft. In the early American regime, from the period 1898 to 1903, the country was ruled by American military governor. In 1902, the first civil government was established under William H. Taft. However, it was only during the terms of second civil government, Lucky Wright, that the Bureau of Internal Revenue, or BIR, was created through the passage of Reorganization Act Number 1189 date July 2, 1904. In August 1, 1904, the BIR was formally organized and made operational under the Secretary of Finance, Henry I.D., author of the Internal Revenue Law of 1904, with John S. Ford as the first collector commissioner. The Internal Revenue Law of 1904 was passed as a reaction to the problems of collecting land tax. It prescribed 10 major sources of revenue. 1. Leasing tax on firms. Dealing in alcoholic beverage and tobacco. 2. Excise tax on alcoholic beverage and tobacco products. 3. Tax on banks and bankers. 4. Document stamp tax. 5. The cedula. 6. Tax on insurance and insurance companies. 7. Tax on forest products. 8. Mining concession. 9. Tax on business and manufacturing. 10. Occupational licenses. In 1907, some provinces were authorized to double for the cedula to support that construction and maintenance of the roads. The industry tax was levied on the business community according to their profitability. The first organization started with 69 employees, which consisted of a collector, beans collector, one chief clerk, one law clerk, one records clerk, and 3 division chiefs. Following the tenure of John S. Ford, were three more American collector, namely Ellis Cromwell, 1909 to 1912, William T. Holting, 1912 to 1914. And James J. Rafferty, 1914 to 1918. They were all appointed by the Governor General with approval of the Philippine Commission and U.S. President. During the term of collector holding the Bureau had its first reorganization on January 1, 1913, with the creation of its 8th division, namely 1. Accounting, 2. Cash, 3. Clerical, 4. Inspection, 5. Law, 6. Real estate, 7. License, 8. Prison. In 1913, the Underwood-Simons Tariff Act was passed, resulting in a reduction in the revenue of the government, as a export tax levied on sugar, tobacco, hemp, and copra were lifted. Collection by the real estate and license division were confined to revenue occurring the city of Manila. In the line with the Philippinization policy of the U.S. President William McKinley, Filipino collectors were appointed. The first 3 BIR collectors were 1. Wenceslao Trinidad, 1918 to 1922. 2. Juan Posadas Jr., 1922 to 1934. 3. Alfredo Yatao, 1934 to 1938. In 1914, an income tax was introduced. In 1919, an inheritance tax was created. In May 1921, by virtue of Act Number 299, the real estate, license, and cash division were abolished, and their functions were transferred to the city of Manila. As a result of their transfer, the Bureau was left 5 divisions, namely 1. Administrative, 2. Law, 3. Accounting, 4. Income tax, and 5. Inspection. Thereafter, the Bureau established the following: 1. The Examiner Division, formerly the Income Tax Examiner Section, which was later with the Income Tax Division. 2. The Secret Service Section, which handled the detection and surveillance activities, but was later abolished on January 1, 1951. Except for minor changes and the creation of the Miscellaneous Tax Division in 1939, the Bureau organization remained the same from 1921 to 1941. 1932, a national lottery was established to create more revenue for the government. However, these new creations were not enough to increase government revenue. In 1937, the Secretary of Finance promulgated Regulation Number 995, recognizing the provincial inspection district, maintaining in each province an internal revenue office supervised by a provincial agent. That's all. Thank you.
Taxation during Commonwealth. New measures and legislation. Income tax rates were increased in 1936. Surtax rates on individual net income in excess of 10,000 pesos. Income tax rates of corporation were also increased. Cedula tax was abolished. Resident tax was imposed on every citizen's age 18 years old and on every corporation. So, did ito po, sa panahon daw po ng Commonwealth, gumawa daw po sila ng bagong batas para daw po mas maging pantay ang sistema ng pagbubuwis. At noong 1936 daw po, ay mas nadagdagan po yung rate ng buwis sa kita at nagdaragdag po ng rate ang surtax. So, ano nga ba ang surtax? Ito po yung extra amount ng tax na sinisingil sa meron ng umiiral na buwis o yung malalaki na po yung kita para punduhan ang isang programa ng government. At ito ay maaaring 1% ng isang sure na halaga o isang flat dollar rate na ang mga individual ay dapat na magbayad. So, 1937 daw ay mas nadagdagan po yung kita ng buwis ng mga corporation. Pero noong 1940, yung mga 18 years old daw po ay pinatawan ng buwis sa paninirahan. Kumbaga, obligasyon na po na magbayad ng buwis. So, ano nga ba ang tax? Para po sa mga hindi nakakaalam, ang tax po, ito po yung buwis na sa pilitang sinisingil o kailangan talaga magbayad sa ayon sa gusto ng mga na ipinataw ng isang nagbabayad ng buwis ng isang samahang panggobyerno para daw po mapunduhan ang panggastos ng government at iba't ibang mga gastos sa publiko. Kapag po hindi kayo nakabayad ng buwis o kaya tinakasan niyo po ang pagbabayad ng buwis, pwede po kayong maparusahan ng batas. So, ano nga po ba ang nangyari during Commonwealth period? Sa panahon daw po ng Commonwealth, yung mga nangungupahan daw po na magsasaka na nagtataglay ng karaingan na kadalasang nakaugat sa debt na dulot ng sistema ng sharecropping. Sharecropping, ito po yung mga magsasaka na nangungupahan. So, kailan nga po ba talaga nagsimula ang taxation? So, ang tax daw po o pagbabuwis ay nasa batas ng Republic Act o RA number 2211 noong May 15, 1959 na lumikha ng Joint Legislature Executive Tax Commission o JLETC. In 1939, the Commonwealth government drafted National Internal Revenue Code. Number 1. Normal tax of 3% and the surtax on income was replaced by a single tax at a progressive rate. So, yung 3% daw po ng buwis at yung surtax, uulitin ko po, ang surtax ay ang extra amount ng buwis. Kumbaga po, yung 3% ng buwis at yung surtax, pinagsama na po nila para maging solong buwis. Kumbaga po, isahang pagbayad ng buwis. Number 2, personal exemption were introduced. So, ano nga po ba ang exemption? Ito po yung proseso ng pagpapalaya o estado ng pagiging malaya sa isang obligasyon. Halimbawa, paglibre sa mga singil sa buwis, kunwari po yung center, di po ba magpapacheck up po tayo ay libre lamang po at walang bayad. So, ang personal exemption, ito po yung kunwari yung isang tao nilibre sa pagbayad ng buwis sa isang tiyak na halaga ng kita para sa kanilang sarili. Halimbawa po, yung mga senior di po ba o tayo ay nakakakuha ng libreng gamot sa center. So, noong 1931 daw po ay ipinakita o ipinakilala ang batas. In 1939, the Commonwealth government drafted National Internal Revenue Code. Number 1. Normal tax of 3% and the surtax on income was replaced by a single tax at a progressive rate. So, yung normal tax daw po na 3% sa buwis at yung surtax, ulitin ko po, ang surtax ay ang extra amount ng buwis. Yung 3% ng buwis at yung surtax ay pinagsama po nila para maging solong buwis. Kumbaga po, isang pagbabayad na natin ng buwis. Number 2, personal exemption were introduced. So ano nga ba ang personal exemption? Ito daw po yung mga bawas sa buwis. Kumbaga po yung mga mahihirap po, binabawasan po yung buwis nila. Ito din po yung tumutulong sa pinakamahirap na sambahayan para po hindi sila mapailalim sa buwis sa kita. Halimbawa po yung mga pamilya na malalaki o mas maraming umaasa sa kanila, binabawasan po yung tax o buwis nila. So lahat po tayo pwedeng mag-claim ng tax exemption. Isa para sa iyo o isa para sa asawa mo kung ikaw ay kasal na. So, nag-i-exist pa ba ang personal exemption? So, ang personal exemption ay nagamit noong 2017, pero inalis siya mula 2018 hanggang 2025. Corporation number 3, corporation income tax was slightly increased by introducing taxes on inherited estates or gifts donated in the name of dead person. So, number 3, corporation income tax was slightly increased by introducing taxes on inherited estates or gifts donated in the name of dead person. So, yung inherited or inheritance, ito yung mga mana o ipinapamana na ari-arian ng yumaong o namatay na mahal nila sa buhay. Tulad ng mga pera sa bank account, alahas, o kaya ay sasakyan at iba pang mga nasalat na asset. So, yung mga nakatanggap daw po ng mana, pwede po silang sumailalim sa buwis sa mana, kung saan mas malayong nauugnay ang isang benepisyaryo sa namatayan. Mas malaki malamang na buwis sa mana. Kumbaga po yung tax o yung buwis ay lalaki yung benepisyo ng tagapagmana. So, paano nga ba nag-work yung inheritance? So, yung mana po ay pwedeng mula sa $1,000 hanggang sa $1,000,000. Ang mga inheritance asset o yung mga nagmana ay napapailalim sa mga inheritance tax o yung mga buwis sa mana, kung saan pwedeng makita ng mga benepisyaryo o mga tagapagmana ang kanilang sarili sa mga pananagutan sa buwis. Ang mga rate ng isang inheritance tax kung minsan po ay tinutukoy bilang isang net duty ay nakadepende sa maraming salik, kabilang po dito ang estado ng paninirahan ng benepisyaryo, ang halaga ng inheritance at ang relasyon ng tagapagmana sa pamilya. Number 5, taxes on liquors, cigarettes, forestry products, and mining were increased. Number 6, dividends were made taxable. So, yung dividends nga daw po ay ginawang buwis. So, ano nga ba ang dividends o dividendo? Ito po yung pamamahagi na makakita ng isang korporasyon sa shareholders o kasosyo nito. Kapag po ang isang korporasyon o isang kumpanya ay kumita ng tubo o sobra, nakakapagbayad po sila ng isang dividends sa mga shareholders. So, yung mga pera o halagang di na ipapamahagi ay kinukuha po ulit para ipuhunan sa negosyo. Number 4, the cumulative sales tax was replaced by a single turnover tax of 10% on luxuries. So, yung mga buwis daw po sa pagbebenta ay pinagsama-sama po nila para po maging solong buwis.
Fiscal policy from 1946 to present. The United States may have declared the Philippines independent, but as the country needed rehabilitation funds from the United States, the dependency of the Philippines to the American was an opportunity to be taken advantage of by the former colonial administrators. Economic situation in 1949. There was a severe lack of funds in many aspects of governance, such as the military and education sectors. No efforts were made to improve tax collections in the United States, advised the adoption of direct taxation. President Manuel Rojas declined the proposal because it did not want to alienate its allies in Congress. President Elpidio Quirino. Impetus for the economic growth came during the time of President Elpidio Quirino through the implementation of import and exchange controls that led to import substitution development. This policy allowed the expansion of a viable manufacturing sector that reduced economic dependence on imports. New tax measures include higher corporate tax rates that increased government revenues. Tax revenue in 1953 increased twofold compared to 1948, the year when Quirino first assumed presidency. Magsaysay, Garcia, and Macapagal promised to study the structure and policy of the country through the creation of a tax commission in 1959 by means of Republic Act No. 2211 to make way for a more robust and efficient tax collection scheme. Post-war fiscal policy remained regressive, characterized by the overburdening of the lowest class, while the landed elite who held business interests were in Congress to ensure that taxes would not be levied to them who belonged to the higher class of the society. 1959 to 1960. Congress did not pass any tax legislation despite important changes in the economy, and the vested interests of Filipino businessmen in Congress would manifest in many instances, such as the rejection of taxes on imports. Indirect taxation contributed to 3/4 of tax revenues, and the Omnibus Tax Law of 1969 did not increase the ratio of income tax to general tax revenue. Collection of taxes remained poor. Tax structure was still problematic, and the much of the public funds were lost to corruption, which left the government incapable of funding projects geared toward development. Marcos years in 1981 to 1985. Tax system remained regressive. Tax system was still heavily dependent on indirect taxes, which made up 70% of total tax collection. The tax system also remained unresponsive. Taxes grew at an average annual rate of 15% and generated a low tax yield. Tax effort, defined as the ratio between the share of the actual tax collection in the gross domestic product and predictable taxable tax effort, defined as the ratio between the share of the actual tax collection in the gross domestic product and predictable taxable capacity, was at a low of 10.7%. Corazon Aquino took the helm of the government after the EDSA Revolution, reformed the tax system through the 1986 Tax Reform Program. The aim of this tax reform program is to improve the responsiveness of the tax system, promote equity by ensuring that similarly situated individuals and firms bear the same tax burden, promote growth by withdrawing or modifying taxes that reduce incentives to work, or produce and improve tax administration by simplifying the tax system and promoting tax compliance. The term of Aquino was the introduction of the value-added tax, or VAT, with the following features. Number 1. Uniform rate of 10% on sale of domestic and imported goods in services, and 0% on exports and foreign currency denominated sales. Number 2. 10% in lieu of varied rates applicable to fixed taxes, 16 nominal rates, advance sales tax, tax on original sale, subsequent sales tax, compensating tax, miller's tax, contractor's tax, broker's tax, film lessors, and distributor tax, excise tax on solvents and matches, and excise tax on processed videotapes. Number 3. 2% tax on entities with annual sales or receipts of less than 50. The term of Aquino was the introduction of the value-added tax or VAT with the following features. Number 1. Uniform rate of 10% on the sale of domestic and imported goods and services, and 0% on exports and foreign currency denominated sales. Number 2. 10% in lieu of varied rate applicable to fixed taxes, 16 nominal rates, advance sales tax, tax on original sale, subsequent sales tax, compensating tax, miller's tax, contractor's tax, broker's tax, film lessors, and distributor tax, excise tax on solvents and matches, and excise tax on the processed videotapes. Number 3. 2% tax on entities with annual sales or receipts of less than 5.2 million. Number 4. Adaptation of tax credit methods of calculating tax by subtracting tax on inputs from tax on gross sales. Number 5. Exemptions of the sales of basic commodities such as agriculture and marine food products in their original state, price-regulated petroleum products and fertilizers. And number 6. Additional 20% tax on essential articles such as jewelry, perfumes, toilet, waters, yachts, and other vessels for pleasure and sports. In 1986, the VAT law was signed. In 1988, the VAT law was put to effect. It was a reliable source of revenue for the government. New tax laws would reduce its reliability as legislated exemption group 42 along with tax reform came the administrative reforms such as the restructuring of the Department of Finance and its attached agency and the Bureau of Internal Revenue or BIR through the Executive Order of 127. Tax collection and tax audits. Where intensified computerization was introduced and corruption was relatively reduced, which improved the trust in the BIR in general. As a result of the tax reform of the Aquino administration, both tax and revenue effort rose, increasing from 10.7% in 1985 to 15.4% in 1992. Fidel Ramos in 1992. Greater political stability during the administrator allowed for continued economic growth. The Ramos administration ventured into its own tax reform program in 1997 through the Comprehensive Tax Reform Program. Implemented to make the tax system broad-based, simple, and with reasonable tax rates. 2. Minimize tax avoidance allowed by existing flaws and loopholes in the system. Number 3. encourage payments by increasing tax exemption tables, lowering the highest tax rates, and simplifying procedure, and rationalize the grant of tax incentives, which was estimated to be worth of 531.7 billion pesos in 1994. The VAT base was also broadened in 1997 to include services through Republic Act 7716. The features of the improved VAT law were as follows. Number 1. Restored the VAT exemptions for all cooperative agriculture, electric, credit, or multi-purpose and others, provided that the share capital of each member does not exceed 515,000 pesos. Number 2. Expanded the coverage of the terms simply processed by including broiling and roasting, effectively narrowing the tax base for the food products. Number 3. Expanded the coverage of the term original state by including molasses. Number 4. The exempted from the VAT are the following: importation of meat, sale or importation of coal and natural gas in whatever form or state, educational services rendered by private educational institution duly accredited by the Commission on Higher Education (CHED), house and lot and other residential dwellings valued at 51 million and below, subject to the adjustment using the Consumer Price Index or CPI, below subject to this price index or CPI, 43 less of residential units with monthly rental per unit of not more than 58,000, subject to adjustment using CPI. President Joseph Estrada in 1998 was too short to constitute any changes in the tax system. Then Vice President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo was swept to power through another EDSA revolution as president. She undertook increased government spending without adjusting tax collection. In 2002 to 2004, it resulted in large deficits. Government had to look for additional sources of revenue. In 2005, the expanded value-added tax or EVAT was signed into law as Republic Act 9337. This expanded the VAT base, subjecting the VAT energy products such as the coal and petroleum products and electricity generation, transmission, and distribution. Select professional services were also taxed. In February 2006, the VAT tax rate was also increased from 10% to 12%. President Benigno Aquino III. President Benigno Aquino III succeeded President Arroyo in 2010. He promised that no new taxes would be imposed and additional revenue would have to come from adjusting existing taxes. The administration ventured into the adjustment of excise tax on liquor and cigarettes or the sin tax reform, motivations for which was primarily fiscal, public health, and social order-related considerations. Republic Act 10351 was passed and government revenues from alcohol and tobacco excise taxes increased collections from tobacco and alcohol in 2015, made up 1.1% of the gross domestic product, and the improvement in tax collections resulted in the Philippines receiving a credit rating upgrade in the investment-grade status. The syntax reform was an exemplar on how tax reform could impact social services as it allowed for the increase of the Department of Health budget triple in 2015 and free health insurance premium for the poor people enrolled in the PhilHealth increased from 55.2 million in 2012 to 515.4 million in 2015. President Rodrigo Duterte promised tax reform, particularly in income taxes, as it vowed to lower income tax rates shouldered by working Filipinos. The present income tax scheme of the country is the second highest in Southeast Asia, and the current laws on income taxes were outdated as they were drafted 2 decades ago. The proposed tax reform also seeks to limit VAT exemptions and increase excise tax on petroleum products and automobiles. It is hoped that reforms in the country tax policy will result in the much-desired economic development that will be felt even by the lowest classes in the society.